We are in Albany at the Office of the Aging, and we are with Greg Olson. He's the director of the New York State Office for the Aging. And we're here to talk about the value that seniors bring to our community, but often it's a demographic that is a target of ageism and considered to be of very little value in our culture. First of all, hi, and thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks.
Well, it's your office, so you have to be here. We came to you. Let's start with the basics with our seniors. Why, in your opinion, are they often undervalued in our culture?
Yeah, and I think you have to go back hundreds of years. We're a society that values work, right? And back in the agricultural community, folks that are not able to work were seen as devalued. I think we still place a tremendous amount of pride and effort in work, and what I see in reality doesn't match, I think, what we have grown up with: cartoons, television shows, print media, et cetera. And it usually happens to older adults when they retire. We really value work, but I think the story that we tell is this is an extraordinarily important segment of the population, economically, socially, and intellectually.
And we're going to dig into that a little bit. In the Western cultures, they're traditionally labeled ageist, and Eastern cultures are recognized for their more accepting view of older adults and embrace their wisdom and respect. In your professional opinion, why the divide, and how do we change that?
I think it's because of our culture. There are other cultures, Native Americans here in the United States, that really value the older population. I think you just got to put facts behind what people think to try to combat it. I'm seeing some things change in language, like we don't use terms like elderly and senior citizen. Not because I think that they're bad, but it elicits a negative response. So we talk about older adults, older individuals, older New Yorkers, and we put the value behind it. What are they doing to help their families, their communities? Are they supporting local businesses? What's their contributions? That's not to say that every older adult is wealthy. There are lots of individuals that need assistance, but it's the one population we paint with a broad brush to stereotypes and ageism.
I want to dive into something. According to AARP, people over 50 control 70% of the country's wealth and make up 51% of consumer spending. That's huge. More than $7 trillion. In New York, more than 935,000 individuals age 60 plus contribute, here it comes, 495 million hours of community service annually for an economic value of $13.9 billion. If they're out there doing this, if they're contributing in this way, why aren't we seeing this value, and how do we change that narrative?
Well, I think this is how you begin to change the narrative, is to talk about it. You're absolutely right. It's actually 83% of all the U.S. household wealth is held by people over the age of 50. The volunteer rates that you just mentioned, that's just New York alone. So you're talking about hospitals and poll workers and YMCAs and all these community not-for-profits that are really being stood up by this incredible 1 million people who are contributing their time. Money spent at the local level. You've got 62% across New York State. So if you take New York City out of it, it jumps to 72% of older adults own their own homes and have no mortgage. They're sitting on $8 trillion of home equity. What are they doing? They're supporting Medicaid. They're supporting local property taxes. They're supporting local businesses. They're supporting the schools. If you look at the contributions to Social Security, $47 billion a year in New York is spent here. The New York State retirement system, 80%, $10.6 billion, goes back into New York communities. We know that they are a huge portion of the state, local, and national tax base, 36% and 42% respectively. That's going to quadruple in the next 30 years, and that's just some of the data. So we need to talk about that. You have a lot of older people that are still working. You have people going back to work. They're volunteering. They're mentoring. They're in schools. They're everywhere. And if you go around anywhere, you're at the malls, you go camping, you're in tourism, whatever it might be, you're going to find older adults everywhere. We just have never talked about it that way.
Would our economy function differently without them? It sounds like it certainly would. And how?
Yeah, we'd be poor. So in New York alone, right, 36% of the population's 50 and over. They're supporting 43%, $719 billion of the GDP. That's going to quadruple. Supporting 6 million jobs, generated $482 billion in wage income, and are 39% of the tax base. So if you remove that, I think it's crystal clear your economy would come to a halt. These are individuals with assets. years of family experience, years of work experience, years of life experience, and many give back. We just got to continue to tell the story. This is an extraordinarily valuable population, and I think why we talk about it differently is we want to keep folks healthy and well in New York State to be a part of life, whether that be social connections or their economic contributions.
And one of the best ways to do this is to use social media, to use outlets like we're doing right now. A large majority of ads tend to target the younger age demographic. I'm seeing the tide turn, but how do we remind marketers that seniors are also consumers, and according to you, great consumers?
Well, you're absolutely right. And I'm starting to see the tide change as well, but it takes a lot of time. I was recently gave a presentation at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. in front of 120 venture capitalists, people that want to invest in the older adult marketplace for exactly that reason. When you go through the data, you can't neglect the population. It's not pitting older adults against younger people. It's, to your point, everything is marketed towards anti-aging young. But the market, more than 50% of the market is the populations that we serve, and to not recognize that as a business leader in whatever business you have is a huge mistake.
Are you seeing on social media, even on television ads, more of our aged members of society participating in that?
Oh, definitely. And participating in a positive way. So I think they've always participated, but it's like, what's the messaging, right? Anti-aging or frailty or Alzheimer's and nursing homes. And again, those things exist, and it's our jobs to help support that. But you are definitely seeing a change in how people are portrayed much more positively.
Let's wrap this up with a social aspect. Can you talk to us about the social value that older citizens add to their families? For example, growing up with a grandparent versus not having the influence of a grandparent, or sharing wisdom and experience with grandkids. It's the key in other cultures. It should be the key in our culture as well.
And I think for a lot of families it is, and that's what I mean by things don't match your own reality. My grandmother lived with us. She was very active. I mean, I learned how to make pies and pastries and learned how to bring sugar to strawberry picking so we could eat them while we were in the fields and everything else. Big volunteer. Organizations that I've worked with that have been run by older adults as volunteers, like that's how I grew up, is really seeing the value, not only the life value, but what folks can do in their later years. So I think your point is well taken. You know, we try to do much more to bring generations together, because I think one of the ways to combat ageism is you start younger. Ageism is learned. So is homophobia. So is sexism. So is racism. All of those things are learned. So that means it can be unlearned. And I think you got to start earlier. But you're right. There are many, I mean, in New York alone, there's over 350,000 grandparents who are primary caregivers of their grandkids because of incarceration, opioid abuse, fentanyl, death, things like that. But more importantly, having somebody that has the experience that you talked about, life experience, work experience, I think is extraordinarily valuable.
Is there anything you want to add, a point you want to make, something I should have asked you and I didn't?
I just think people should need to look at their own lives and their own circles. There's one thing that's portrayed and what comes upon us, and those are the things that you learn through a variety of medias. And then there's your own experiences, and many people have a similar experience that I did with my grandmother. And I didn't meet either of my grandfathers; they were dead before I was born. But I think a lot of people have those. And to really not look at wrinkles and skin and aging as a negative, but what people learn over the course of their lives that can be given back.
Great value there. Thank you so much for your time. We genuinely appreciate it.
Thank you.